Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Quick Break Games. So many are aware that TT Games' LEGO franchise all started in 2005 with LEGO Star Wars the video game. But some may not realize that nearly every LEGO game also has a separate handheld version. Today we're celebrating the 20th anniversary by doing a retrospective and analysis of LEGO Star Wars the video game on Gameboy Advance. The Gameboy Advance version was outsourced to developer Griptonite Games and not made by TT Games like the home console and PC versions. With the obvious power level gap from the other platforms, the GBA version is significantly different in adapting the Star Wars prequel trilogy. When booting up the game, you are met with a familiar Star Wars themed main menu. You have the option to select story mode, free play mode, or access the options, but free play will be blocked initially. Upon selecting story, you are surprisingly able to start from the first levels of episodes 1, 2, or 3 right off the bat. We'll of course be checking these out in chronological order, but before we do, let's address the elephant in the room. There's no Dexter's Diner or any sort of hub world in this version. You can just jump into the levels straight from the main menu, so it definitely seems like they cut some corners there. The first level of episode 1, the Phantom Menace, is called Federation Ship. I'm not gonna lie, it feels a little weird that this isn't called Negotiations. But anyway, cutscenes in this game are presented as picture slideshows, essentially that you press A to progress to the next image. We see Obi-Wan arrive on the ship and get greeted by TC-14. After that, we get into what the actual gameplay looks like. In the GBA version, the game uses an isometric camera with 2D visuals. After being escorted by TC-14, we begin playing as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Alright, so let's start off with the controls. The Game Boy Advance is limited on buttons, so the gameplay is pretty straightforward. You're immediately introduced to Obi-Wan's Force ability, which can be used with the L button. It works basically the same as the console version, where you can walk up to various glowing objects throughout the game and use the Force on them. You use the D-pad to move. It can feel a little weird to move with the isometric camera controls. Fortunately, there is an option to use directional controls in the options menu to solve this. Unfortunately, I didn't discover that this was an option until after I completed the game, so I ended up getting used to the default isometric controls. The B button is your attack, so with Obi-Wan that means swinging your lightsaber. The A button is jump. You'll notice the HUD or heads-up display is different from the home console versions as well. Your health is represented with hearts, but you have 7, and trust me, you're gonna need them, as this game is not exactly easy. You also have a lightsaber bar, which represents stamina, a unique feature for this version. Each character has a special ability, and using it will drain that stamina bar. Obi-Wan's special ability is force pushing enemies. Okay, enough with the basics, let's talk about this first level. After exiting the spawn room, you get thrown into combat with some standard battle droid enemies. You can block and potentially deflect their shots back at them with your lightsaber by holding the B button. Tapping the B button does your standard lightsaber swing. You can also do the Jedi Slam move by jumping and attacking in midair, which pretty much works the same as the home console versions. Next, you'll reach a brief puzzle where you need to step on 4 colored paths to progress to the next hallway. Eventually, you'll see an arrow pointing you to the next area. The levels in this game are typically divided into 2 to 3 areas. So now we're in the second section of this level, which is called Interior. Reaching a new section like this is important because it serves as a checkpoint. This is where this game's difficulty comes into play. Unlike the home console versions, when you die, you restart at the beginning of your latest checkpoint. In some of the later levels, this game can get pretty difficult, as we'll see. The final section of this level is called Launching Dock. You'll find some colored pads that you must run across as they flash yellow, which opens up the door to get inside this transport ship. After taking out the enemies inside, the first level ends. So each level ends with a results screen that shows you how you did in that level. In this version, you're actually ranked based on your performance. That includes how many enemies you defeated, how many shots you deflected, how many studs you collected, and lastly, how many Death Star plans you found. More on those in a bit. You are then given either a Padawan, Knight, or Master ranking. These rankings don't really do anything for you, but it can be fun to try to get the Master rank on every level. Additionally, free play mode will unlock after completing a level in story mode. The second level is called Naboo Forest and has you playing as Qui-Gon Jinn. His special ability allows him to turn invisible for a short time, which definitely comes in handy when you're being overrun by enemies, which will happen in this game. I do want to pause here and talk briefly about studs. You get studs by destroying objects or using the Force on different things in the environment. However, there is no true Jedi bar like in the home console versions, but you still do want to collect as many studs as you can for 2 reasons. First, to improve your odds of getting Master rank for that level, and second, to purchase characters for use in free play mode. We'll talk more about free play towards the end of this video. But back to the studs. For some reason, they have different values in this one. Silver studs are worth 1, blue studs are worth 5, and gold studs are worth 10. Once you reach the second section of this level, you'll encounter Jar Jar Binks. He still keeps his iconic high jumping ability in this one. You can freely switch between characters in this version by pressing the select button. You can only have one playable character on screen at once, so when you switch, whatever character you're playing as will break apart, and then the next character will get built up and you start playing as them. Jar Jar throws those blue grenades from the movie as his main attack, which I personally find to be pretty weak, as you're going to be decimated while you're just throwing them out in the open. His special ability is pretty good though. He runs around like a lunatic and pretty much one-hits any enemy he touches for a few seconds. This actually is very effective if you have several enemies grouped up together, but most of the time I'd recommend using a lightsaber character for combat since you can block attacks. When you reach the water, the level ends with a cutscene showing our heroes dive into the Gungan city below. The next level, Naboo City, starts out in the street section where you can play as Qui-Gon or Jar Jar. When using Jar Jar's high jumping ability, you may come across this game's collectible, Death Star plans. There are 5 of these hidden in each level, which I do have guides for on this channel. You can check the playlist link in the description. But finding these will get you towards the Master rank, and more importantly, will get you towards 100% completing the game. Anyways, this level is all about rescuing Padme. You'll rescue her, and then she'll join your party to where you can play as her. She's a blaster class character, so she can shoot enemies from a distance, but she is vulnerable to droids, so you gotta be careful. Her blaster allows you to shoot these blue targets, which you are required to shoot to progress to the next area. Once you get to the hangar, you rescue some Naboo security guards, and the level ends. Now we move on to Tatooine, where Qui-Gon will find the Chosen One himself, Anakin Skywalker. This level begins in the dunes, and in story mode, you'll only be able to play as Qui-Gon for this one. You'll need to use the Force on this radar, which will allow you to ride on this speeder. You don't need to drive the speeder since there's no vehicle levels in this game, but you can jump on top of it and use the Force to reach the next area. This next area is Mos Eisley. You'll find young Anakin and his mother. When you talk to them, you'll have a brief cutscene of R2-D2 getting attacked by some Tusken Raiders. You'll need to rescue R2, and then he'll be added to your squad. R2, of course, is part of the Astromech character class, which means he can hover over horizontal gaps by holding down the A button. You'll need this to hover across this gap and reach a pressure pad, which will lower the gate. You actually need to do this again directly after to lower the next gate. For me, this was when I first discovered the difficulty of this game. There are loads of Tusken Raiders in this section, not to mention the 2 sentry turrets. And because of the checkpoint system, if you die, you'll need to restart from where you found Anakin and his mother at the beginning of Mos Eisley. So you'll really need to master the game's combat system to survive. But after you get past the 2 gates, there will be an additional hallway you have to fight through to finally reach Watto. You talk to Watto, Anakin will come out, but you won't be able to play as him just yet. The final section will have you return to the dunes. Here you'll encounter Obi-Wan and get the first look at Darth Maul. There's no pod race level in this version, but it is neat how we get to sort of experience the Darth Maul on Tatooine scene from the movie, which was absent from the other versions of this game. Next is the final level of the Phantom Menace, Return to Naboo Forest. The opening section here is reused from the previous Naboo level. This one is tricky since you are stuck playing as Jar Jar most of the time, and his blue grenade attack isn't exactly that great. The best option is probably just to avoid enemies as much as possible. The following section is called Battlefront, not to be confused with the Star Wars Battlefront games that were coming out at the time when this game released. This is actually the beginning area from the Naboo Forest level being reused. So yeah, definitely get used to areas being reused in this one. But this section is pretty difficult. You need to take out 30 droids as Jar Jar. I highly recommend spamming his special ability when the droids are grouped together. This will get you several kills. There is some health that's found on top of the logs, which will come in handy. Once you beat that, you'll get a cutscene of Anakin destroying the Federation ship and all the droids being deactivated. Now we move to the Darth Maul boss fight. You play as Obi-Wan and see the famous scene of Qui-Gon dying. In this version, there's not even a fight. Qui-Gon just kind of gets one-shotted by Darth Maul. Come on, dude. At least try. But anyways, this is the first lightsaber duel. Darth Maul's health is displayed on the ground beneath him. You attack him with the B button, and you'll often get into a lightsaber lock with a horizontal meter. You need to mash the B button as fast as possible to push the meter to the blue side on the right. If you don't mash it fast enough, you will end up on the red side, which means Darth Maul's attack will go through, and you'll lose health. If you ended on the blue side, your attack will go through and you'll damage Darth Maul. I honestly have no idea how these duels work exactly. Sometimes it's almost impossible to push the meter into the blue, and other times it's fairly easy, so I'm not sure what actually dictates the difficulty here. But anyways, once he's defeated, you'll see the slideshow cutscene of him being cut in half, and the level ends. We're now ready to begin Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, with Return to Tatooine. Episode 2 is actually only 3 levels in this game, so large chunks of the film are completely skipped over. All of the Camino stuff is skipped, so we start out playing as Padawan Anakin on Tatooine on the hunt for his mother. Yes, so while a lot is being skipped, we're getting to play something that's not featured on the home console release. But unfortunately, once again, we have a major case of reused content here. The first 2/3 of this level is essentially an exact repeat of the earlier Tatooine level. You have to hover across this gap using the speeder again, fight a billion Tusken Raiders and Mos Eisley again, talk to Watto again, and you'll eventually get to the third section, which is brand new. In the new Moisture Farm section, you'll need to repair 5 of these antenna-looking things, which isn't too tough. Then there's an emotional cutscene of Anakin losing his mother to the Tusken Raiders. But man, I wish we got to experience this in the home console version, because in this final section you get to slaughter 25 Tusken Raiders, which is pretty fun, assuming you're good enough to stay alive. For the last 2 levels of Episode 2, we land on Geonosis, and this first level is called Geonosis Droid Factory. Here you play as Obi-Wan as he investigates the Separatist. You may notice that Obi-Wan doesn't have his beard in this level, because yes, Obi-Wan stays in his Episode 1 Padawan appearance throughout this entire game. Between all the reused levels, with many more of those to come, and now the lack of character models for each film, you start to get the sense that this game was rushed. But anyway, this level starts out in this tunnel section where you fight the new Geonosian enemy type. They're pretty easy to kill, but make sure to watch out for these welding machines. The level ends with Obi-Wan getting captured by Count Dooku. Notice there's no appearance of Jango Fett in the story of this one. The final level of Attack of the Clones is Geonosian Factory Rescue. Again, this is reused areas from the previous level for the most part. You start out as R2-D2, so you really need to be avoiding enemies as much as possible to survive. Near the start, there's a protocol droid that gives R2 a hover upgrade when you hit select. R2 is able to hover vertically to the next area, which is pretty cool, but it only lasts for that one jump, so it's not like a permanent upgrade that you can do at any time. I suppose now is a good time to talk about protocol droids. These are found throughout the game to provide upgrades in exchange for studs. Protocol droids can give you health, stamina, or even a little probe droid that grants you an extra life. Alright, so anyways, back to the level, you end up rescuing Anakin, now a Padawan, and Padme. So again, you go through a lot of reused areas, and also R2 has this hacking ability that I haven't talked about yet. There's these panels that R2 can hack to lower force fields and stuff, so pretty similar to how it works in the home console version. But eventually, you encounter Count Dooku for this game's second lightsaber duel. Obi-Wan and Anakin get wiped out in the cutscene, and then Yoda becomes playable. Dooku is definitely tougher than Darth Maul in my opinion. You really need to mash that B button to override him. He also has a Force Lightning move that will absolutely destroy Yoda if you're not careful, so be sure to back away before he does that. But once he's defeated, Yoda rescues Obi-Wan and Anakin, and that wraps up Episode 2. It's a shame Camino and all of the epic Jedi battle was skipped over, but hey, that's time constraints for you. Alright, on to Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, which has 6 levels, making it the longest episode in the game. However, 2 of those levels are almost completely reused. So Episode 3 starts off with the level Separatist Ship. You begin as Anakin with his Padawan Episode 2 appearance still, and yes, Obi-Wan still has his Episode 1 appearance, which is pretty funny. But anyway, you fight through droids and reach an elevator which gets stuck, similar to the movie. Then you start back at the beginning as R2, where you need to evade enemies to reach a couple panels that need hacked. This part can be pretty challenging as there are loads of droids that need to be avoided. Also, this game actually lags quite a bit if there's a lot of enemies on screen. I guess this game is pretty intensive on the Gameboy Advance. Either that, or the developers didn't have time to optimize it. But anyways, once the elevator is fixed, you continue as Anakin into the next section where there are loads of droids and a lengthy puzzle. For this level, you have to step on the correct colored flashing pad in the right order. If you step on a non-flashing one, you gotta start the puzzle from the beginning. It's not hard, but just a little time consuming. But once you do that, a force field gets lowered, and you're ready for the second Count Dooku boss fight. This one took me a few tries. Again, Dooku's lightning attack is pretty devastating, but once he's defeated, Anakin carries Obi-Wan along with Palpatine getting rescued. Now we land on Kashyyyk as Master Yoda, with the level simply being called Kashyyyk. This level is challenging too. It begins on the beach where multiple clone troopers need rescued from droids. After that, the level moves to the Rothshire city gates. I think I said that word right. For this section, you need to use the force on these wheel-looking things to open a gate. A force field will block your path, so you need to go around it by fighting through waves of droids. Eventually, you'll lower the force field, and then you can lower the gate to reach the next area. This final area is called the canopy. This part drags on for a long time and feels like a maze, but in reality, I'm pretty sure there's just one path you can take. There's just a lot of similar looking areas with loads and loads of droids. Just make sure not to die so you don't have to start back at the beginning. Once you reach this hut with the arrow pointing towards it, the level ends. For the next level, Utapau, the game switches back to Obi-Wan for a little bit. You'll reach this row of sentry turrets, and then the game will have you rush back to the spawn to rescue R4-P17. Once R4 is saved, similar to the Separatist ship level, you're forced to play as only R4 for a bit. Dodge all the battle droids to make your way up to the next floor, then hack this panel, which will instantly destroy that row of sentry turrets from earlier. This leads to the second section, which is called the 7th level. Here you fight more droids, and eventually you reach this puzzle, which stumped me for a bit on my first playthrough. You have to match these blue or yellow pads from the left side, and match that on the right side. Once they all line up, the force field lowers, with another battalion of droids waiting to destroy you on the other side. Shortly thereafter, you'll reach the General Grievous boss fight. This one is a little tricky because they make you fight a bunch of super battle droids beforehand. Fortunately though, you can step on the colored pads around the arena to get more health if you need it. Once they're taken care of, General Grievous himself will come forward. He can't use the force, so he's not super tough, but again, like the previous fights, you will need to mash the B button to override his lightsaber. Once he's defeated, the level ends. Okay, so the next two levels are where we get into some more of the reused content. The next one is called Kashyyyk Clone Attack. This level is literally just playing the first Kashyyyk level, but backwards. You begin as Yoda in the Skyreach huts, which are a series of duplicated rooms with different configurations of enemies in them. Once you get through all of those, you'll be in the canopy section from the other Kashyyyk level. This is where you witness Order 66 take place, so now you have to fight droids and clones for the rest of the game. I find the clones to be a little tougher than the droids, and man, this section goes on for a while. When you finally get to the Rothshire City escape area, it's very similar to what you had to do in the previous Kashyyyk level with using the force to put these wheels on these yellow poles to progress. Once you get to the beach section, instead of rescuing clone troopers, you're going to be using the force on several of these switches, or whatever you want to call these things. And once you find all of them, the force field will lower on the left side, and that finishes off the level. I'd probably say this is the hardest level in the game. Let me know in the comments below if you agree. Next up, we have Utapau Clone Attack, and as you might guess, this level is the first Utapau level, but in reverse. However, this level does have a brand new area at the end, which is pretty cool. So this one is set where Obi-Wan is trying to escape Utapau after Order 66 is activated. This is something you don't really see in the movie other than a brief scene, so I like that they added it in here, despite it mostly being reused content. You begin in the General Grievous boss fight arena, then slowly make your way down. There are a ridiculous amount of enemies in this one, including these sentry turret droids, which will do insane damage to you. Seriously, watch out for them. And then the final area is called the Water Caverns. This is the brand new area I was referring to earlier. It's sort of difficult to navigate. You have to jump up to a switch, use the force on it. This lowers a force field, giving you access to the end of the level. I'd say this level was pretty much a filler level, but I enjoyed it more than the Kashyyyk Clone Attack level, that's for sure. It just doesn't drag on as long, and it has that new cavern section at the end. Alright, so this brings us to the final level of the game, Mustafar. This one opens with a cutscene of Anakin force-choking Padme, fully consumed by the dark side. Before we can fight Anakin, we have to navigate the volcanic flats area of Mustafar. In this level, there's going to be a constant stream of super battle droids attacking you, of the regular blue and green variety. And by the way, what's going on with these green super battle droids throughout the game? Are these guys canon? I definitely never noticed them in the movie. But anyways, you need to be careful not to fall into the lava here. But if you do, it doesn't actually hurt your health too much in my experience. The problem is sometimes you can get stuck and it's difficult to get the game to let you jump out of the lava. There is a part in this level where there's all 3 protocol droids lined up, so you can get extra health, stamina, or another life. I highly recommend getting that extra life if you can, just in case you get demolished by Anakin later. The second and final section of this level is called Unstable Foundation. You'll have to chase Anakin for a bit on these platforms that disappear after a few seconds. Once you drop down to the next area, the first fight with Anakin begins. This fight works just like all the other lightsaber duels in the game, but Anakin can throw his lightsaber, which does an insane amount of damage. Once Anakin is at roughly half health, he'll retreat into another chase sequence. Luckily, the game does give you full health here. Take out the clones and carefully jump across the lava to reach the final battle against Anakin. Get ready to absolutely smash that B button. If you're successful, Anakin will be defeated and you've completed the game. By the way, these cutscenes just look so funny with Obi-Wan and Anakin still being in their Padawan appearances from the previous movies, but in the end, Darth Vader is born. So that's pretty much it for LEGO Star Wars the video game on Game Boy Advance. I do want to briefly talk about free play mode, so you can replay levels in free play like the home console version. However, you can only select one unlocked character to bring in as your free play character. There's 15 characters in total in this game, which you can purchase with studs. Some of these characters are quite expensive, costing 10,000 or more studs, which is going to take some time to grind. So maybe I'll get around to doing that someday. Within the 15 characters, you have stuff like Darth Vader, Count Dooku, Tusken Raider, and even Jango Fett, despite him being absent from the story. The problem I have with this is that most of these characters are pretty useless. You see, the Death Star plan's collectible, which is probably the main reason you'd play free play, they typically only require you to have the high jumping ability, which Jar Jar Binks and Darth Maul have. Darth Maul, of course, can use the Force, a lightsaber, and has the high jumping ability, so he's really the best character in the game. I believe there's maybe 1 or 2 levels that require an astromech droid, but that's it. For the most part, you can pretty much just stick to Darth Maul, and you'll be good to go. So yeah, how free play works is you play as the free play character that you select, along with whatever the story character was for that level. And that's pretty much all there is to free play mode. One other thing I do want to mention is cheat codes. You get cheat codes when you, for example, get all 5 Death Star plans in a level or complete one of the episodes. Yoda will tell you a code after the end screen, and you can write that down and type it in at the pause menu. These cheat codes do things like allowing you to change the color of lightsabers, change the game's music, unlock a character, stuff like that. So it's a pretty cool feature that they added that I wanted to bring attention to. But alright, with that, let's wrap this thing up. I think developer Griptonite Games did a decent job bringing this game down to the Game Boy Advance. It's clear that they were very limited in the time that they had to make this. This game has multiple reused levels, frame rate slowdown in some areas, and obviously the lack of different character models for Obi-Wan and Anakin. It can also be frustrating getting past the waves of enemies without dying. The difficulty really forces you to take things slow and get used to the combat. Despite all this though, I still think this version is worth playing. I enjoyed seeing this game in a new light on handheld, a game that I've played so many times on home console. This game probably isn't something I'll come back to often, but I think you'll have fun for the 2 to 3 hours that it takes to complete the story. So in closing, LEGO Star Wars the video game on Game Boy Advance is a flawed game, but I think it's one that's worth experiencing at least once. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for my retrospective of LEGO Star Wars the video game on Game Boy Advance here for the 20th anniversary of the game. I also have a retrospective of the home console version if you want to check that one out that I did a couple years ago. But yeah, other than that, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not, subscribe for more content like this. I'll see you guys next time here on Quick Break Games.